My guest today is Anoushka Jolly, a social activist and entrepreneur on a mission to eradicate bullying from schools, colleges, and universities and create safer environments for students, fostering a culture of empathy and respect. At just 14 years, Anoushka is the founder and CEO of Anti-Bullying Squad, committed to raising awareness and providing support to combat this pervasive issue. Anoushka's efforts have earned her prestigious accolades, including the Pradhan Mantri Rashtriya Puraskar Award. Her biggest achievement includes securing funding for her anti-bullying app, Kavach, on the reality show Shark Tank, making her the youngest entrepreneur to achieve this milestone. And now my youngest guest on Atlanta Diaries. Hi, Anoushka. Very warm welcome to Atlanta Diaries. And I'm so excited to know more about your whole journey.
Oh, thank you so much. It's lovely to be here.
Awesome. So I'd love for you to describe your childhood and in what ways do you think it played a role in shaping the person you've become?
So I grew up in a nuclear family. So me and my parents, we live together, and I also have a dog. But my parents, they live nearby. So we would kind of visit them a lot. And I have a very close relationship with my cousins and my brothers and sisters. So I always felt like I've had the sibling experience for sure. So definitely that whole values on sharing, on conflict resolution, I've experienced. But I think I always felt like I have a very, very strong support system, whether that's, obviously financial support or emotional support, even support of being able to start my own thing, being able to dream big things and, achieve them. So that fear of like not failing, because I know that I have somebody who's on the ground to catch me. And I've spent great times with my grandparents, and I just love to learn about their life and how different it is from my life. So I've always had a really, really wonderful connection with all my grandparents. And so I think what's contributed to my development as a person the most would be that one-on-one time with my grandparents, because they had the opportunity to grow up in a world where not everything is necessarily complex. And they had very interesting stories to tell. Just as an example, my grandfather, he was going home and he was just like 10 years old or 11 years old, and he had like a lota, and then an eagle came and swooped that away. And that was his first encounter of like, oh my God, what just happened? So when I grew up hearing those stories, even though I lived in a world where everything was like very different and diverse, helped me realize how simple life can be. And so a combination of my support system, my like sibling values, and the stories that I've heard from my grandparents made me into this person that I am.
Any examples, any stories come to your mind? Like any story of conflict resolution and then how do you resolve it?
So I've heard this a lot. In fact, I was talking to my friend the other day, and she was telling me that you're probably the only child I know that's not completely stuck up. And that actually got me thinking. And it's definitely because growing up, I always had like a very tumultuous dynamic with my brother. My brother is only 2 years older than me. He's my chachu's son, basically, my dad's brother. And so like we would have a lot of fights, like whether it's just like who can finish their milk faster. And sometimes we used to play football in the lobby of the house. And my grandmother used to be really, really scared that we knock some like glass vase off the thing. But somehow we managed to never do that. But the fights used to take place between us. But sometimes in the rare moments that my grandmother or my grandfather had said something, suddenly like joining forces. So when I say conflict resolution, I mean like also switching between fighting between us and then all of a sudden joining forces and just like, let's target the grandmother now. And I generally just ask them a lot of questions about what their life used to look like. And my grandmother used to tell me that in the earlier times, people were very, very accommodating. Like there was kind of a sense of family between even neighbors, and you don't see that today. So she was telling me that when she was growing up, their house was like the only house in her neighborhood which had a fridge and a freezer, which
Yeah.
was very rare. So the neighbors used to come and put their like curd and their frozen stuff and vegetables in the fridge. And she used to get very, very annoyed because she grew up with like 8 siblings. So her and her brothers, they plotted something and they decided that let's just turn it off. And when the lady comes, she'll never put her stuff in the fridge again. And so they did that. She got really angry, but they got a good laugh out of it. And I just like crack up every time because it's very different how dependent people were in those times. You don't see that much anymore.
That is so true. It's bringing back my memories with my grandparents. And I remember my grandparents didn't have a phone in their house. And we had to call up the neighbors and, request them and sort of plead, if you don't mind, can you ask him to come and attend the call? I'll call back in 20 minutes. So can you imagine? And now each and every family member has a mobile phone and it's just a nuisance. Yeah. Is there anything that you're sort of trying to bring in your journey, like now?
Hmm. So when I was a kid, I always just saw them as a form of entertainment. So I wouldn't read into them as much as I do today. So I don't feel like afraid or shy to ask for help because I know that, in those times, asking for help was really all you could do. There's nothing wrong with going up to somebody you love or somebody you trust and asking them to be there for you. And I realized that, yeah, it's just how life was, and we could learn a lot from that.
Vulnerability is such an important skill set. So let's shift gears a little bit and let's start with your entrepreneurial journey, right? Love to hear more about it from you.
So when I was in third grade, I was severely bullied by two friends who I considered closest to me. And this continued for a year, and it was a very, very difficult time in my life. I was a very happy and cheerful person, and it changed who I was. I would come home crying every day. It was just a really awful time. I do think that that is what inspired me to take forward my anti-bullying journey. So when I started reflecting on what happened and I overcame it, I decided that I don't want anybody else going through what I did. And I talked to my dad. I said, I want to do something. So he said, why don't you start a website because it will help you reach out to more people. And so I started writing blogs, and then I started taking anti-bullying sessions with schools, talk to the students there and make them understand like what bullying is and how it happens. Then I created an online program on bullying, which was a 1 hour self-paced program where you could learn all about bullying, from its mechanisms to its causes, everything. And then in 2021, I decided that I would create an app called Kavach. So this was initially a bullying reporting mobile app that I even pitched on Shark Tank India, and I was funded by Mr. Aman and Anupam. It was really wonderful because I think at the time that I applied for it, it was just an idea. And then I got in, I got through the rounds, and I was even able to pitch to them and get a deal, which was wonderful. And then I found that, of course, there are a lot more issues. So I also started doing a lot of research and work around mental health issues as a whole. And while this was going on, in January 2023, I was awarded by the Honourable Prime Minister and President of India for my work on bullying. And it was the biggest honor of my life. So since then, since January 2023, I've launched a second version of my app. It's called Kavach 2.0, and it's essentially about adolescent issues, and it aims to kind of help them on their journey by giving them resources, content, and community support to help them tide through the anguish of being an adolescent in times of today.
Thanks, Anoushka. Do you feel comfortable to tell us more about the bullying incident and what really sort of caused you to, I'm sure, realize that this is not something which is uncommon?
Yeah. So I didn't really realize it was bullying because I had no idea what bullying was. Because I was so young, I thought that if I'm feeling bad and nobody else around me is, I might be the problem. And so I didn't take it seriously. They would make me feel really terrible about myself, and They would start saying things about my curly hair or brown skin and making comments about how I look and the way I act. I was never afraid to say what I thought. I don't hold back. I say, that's just who I am. And they made me feel very, very conscious. And it was really horrible. It took me a while to regain that self-confidence. But yeah, I did eventually get over it. After it had been going on for a few months, I decided I want to talk to my parents because there's something wrong and I think they can help me.
So what was the pivotal point when you decided to talk to them, Anoushka?
I talked to them after these two girls had done something really horrible to me and they publicly humiliated me in front of the whole class. Because earlier, when this bullying used to happen, it was just like they would say things to me. So it's not like the teacher had any way of knowing that it was going on. But one day she was not in the classroom and that had me in tears and I couldn't take it anymore. And that's when I went back home and I told my parents about it. And they said, you need to stand up for yourself. I didn't stand up for myself instantly. I would say it took some time for me to process that. But I went back one day and they used to kind of make me tie their shoelaces, keep their plates and stuff like that. So in breakfast time, they told me to pick up their plates and go to the sink. And so I was heading to the sink, but midway I turned around and I went back and I handed everybody their plates and I said, let's keep our plates together. So it was just 5 words that changed how the bullying was taking place. And it was not like I had to be rude or tell them, you keep your own plates. I just told them, let's keep our plates together. It taught me that standing up for yourself doesn't necessarily mean having to give them what they want and disrespect them. You can just silently head out. Then I started distancing myself from them and then I got better friends and I was able to get out of it. And a year later, I started Anti-Bullying Squad.
Wow, that's crazy. So, Anoushka, what kind of a role did your mom and dad play in it? I think it'll be really helpful to hear how you collaborated to solve for this problem.
So my mom and dad always believe in the idea that if your family or if your supporters are there, they are not meant to solve your problem for you. Instead, they are meant to empower you to go and fight the problem yourself. Now, they could have easily gone and talked to the police themselves or contacted the parents or contacted the teacher. But they said, you go and talk to them and stand up for yourself. They always made me feel like if I was not comfortable with that or that didn't work, it wasn't a problem. It didn't make me scared of them or a loser. It just means that I'm not in the right headspace to deal with them. So they always said another option is you can always talk to your teacher and you can talk to your counselor, which I obviously did eventually. But yeah, they always told me that whatever you do, we are here to support you, but we're not going to fight the problem for you. That's the only way you'll feel like power. You'll feel like you're back to being yourself.
Then I also heard the word counselors.
So for us, the counselor was very, very welcoming. In fact, she was my camp instructor in 2nd grade. And I talked to her about it and she was extremely nice. She called us to her room and we were able to kind of sort it out and have a conversation. So a lot of counselors or a lot of teachers, when you go to them, they will blame you for it or they will deny it happened. Because a lot of times, from what I've seen in my experience, the teacher or the counselor or the school does not want to take responsibility for what happened or accept that it happened. But in my case, they were ready to take that responsibility and ready to recognize that, there are some changes that need to be made. Maybe kids need to be taught about bullying and anti-bullying way earlier than we actually start introducing it. She definitely helped me understand their perspective as well. So at that time, I did not feel any sense of empathy for them. But now when I look back, because of what that counselor said, because of the way that she helped me understand them, I do feel a sense of forgiveness. Like they were still also just kids. And sometimes you make mistakes when you're kids.
Wow, Anoushka, that takes a lot of mental strength to even say this. Did she call the kids to the room as well?
She did. Usually, like the counselor talks to the victim themselves, but I really liked her idea of making us face each other. It was not like she just put me in the room with them. She definitely asked me and she made me feel comfortable. But I don't mind confrontations. So, yeah, I liked her idea of doing that.
And was it caustic or was it calm and collected thanks to her mediation?
No, it was caustic because, I mean, yeah, it was definitely caustic, especially when you're kids and you have so much like anger, you don't have much control over what you're feeling. So, yeah, there was definitely screaming and shouting and like, you did this, but you did this. Why would you do this? Definitely. But I also really appreciate her giving us a safe space to do that because letting it out as a kid when you're constantly told to keep your emotions back in is so therapeutic. It's more helpful than we realize. Maybe the reason I'm able to forgive them is because I was able to yell at them and take out my anger, and it was justified.
And I remember last time you told me that thanks to them, I'm doing the amazing work that I'm doing, right? Let's talk about the anti-bullying, the squad, collaborations that you did with different colleges and universities.
So, a lot of my mom's friends are school principals, and one of them suggested to my mom that why doesn't she come over to our school for a session? So, my first session was with Presidium School. And I remember I was very nervous because I'd never spoken about bullying to like students live before. And I was able to connect with them. A lot of teachers actually came back and said that what you're able to get out of them, we are not able to get out of them because they feel much more comfortable talking to a student, talking to somebody that they can relate to. Maybe they don't feel as safe talking to a teacher about it. So that's when I realized that I can use that to my advantage and maybe connect with kids and get them to open up. And so I started doing a lot of these sessions online or offline. And also, I realized that for the students that maybe cannot afford a formal education, it's important for them to know about it as well. So I started contacting NGOs. Bhumi NGO is one. And then there was an NGO called Bramble Network, which works with underprivileged kids in Nigeria. So I was also able to talk to them. It was a completely different environment. The questions that they were asking, what they were more interested in knowing, the way they were talking, it was very, very different.
I'd love you to share a little bit about what exactly do you mean by bullying, considering that you did your research and started the blog, and share a few questions which you were asked. What really came out of those interactions?
So usually when I talk about bullying, I define it as an act that hurts the victim. It's repeated, it's intentional, and there's a power imbalance. So there's four main characteristics. And sometimes I try to do activities with them where I ask them, okay, I display a situation on the board and they have to read it and tell me whether it's bullying or not. So through that, they're really able to understand if somebody makes a comment once, might be intentional, might be not, that's not bullying. That's not to say they're not wrong, but it's not bullying. And you compare that to if somebody is, constantly harassing you in the hallways of school and making you feel bad. And, maybe like a lot of people are watching and you're not feeling comfortable, that would be bullying. I also talk about forms of bullying, cyberbullying, relational bullying, which is more on like relationships and leaving people out and isolation and all that. Then physical bullying, which is of course hitting or punching, and then verbal bullying, which is saying mean things and name calling and stuff like that. With older kids from like age group 6 to 9, I usually try to keep it a little bit vague. So instead of maybe talking about bullying first off, I try to talk about the line and crossing the line. I try to delve into more topics around like gaslighting, passive aggression, boundaries, things that are a little mature because I think they start understanding more mature things as they grow up. The kind of questions that I get, sometimes kids will come up and share their own personal experience and they'll say, I was getting bullied or my friend was getting bullied. So like, what should I do? And then from the NGO kids, they are very, very interested in kind of knowing more on what to do about bullying. Because for them, they are a little more hands-on. Should I hit him back? Should I like tell him off? What should I do? The city kids are a little more sensitive in that sense. They know that they can talk to a teacher. So there's a difference with the kind of solutions. But of course, both of them would depend on like rely on your teachers. They are important. They know they can help you. Of course, it's important to convey that to both of the sets of students.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is that we go to see your school teachers and, of course, keep your communication with your parents open. Do you also tell them how they can empower themselves?
Yeah, that is a big part of it. It does differ from situation to situation because a lot of times kids do not trust their parents. They can't trust their parents and the teachers are not doing anything about it. In situations like that, I would tell them to kind of do something, a more student-led solution. So they can like stand up to the bullies or take their friends and do so. And some of the times with relational bullying, where it's like passive aggressive comments and stuff like that, I don't actually tell them to call it out or tell a teacher about it, because then, how do I put this? The bully would win. That's what they want. They want a reaction out of you. And so if you give them that, they've achieved their goal. So in situations like that, I would usually kind of tell them to fight fire with fire. And I'd be like, if they are being passive aggressive to you, ask them to repeat what they've said, call it out to their face, and they will feel that embarrassment. They will not want to repeat what they've said. The effect definitely is decreased. And generally just like keeping away from people who you feel passive aggressive or cannot communicate like their needs openly. They're not really worth the time and energy to decode.
Shifting gears, Anoushka, let's talk about Kavach now. And then, of course, Shark Tank. Then how did you prepare for it?
We came up with Kavach. We started thinking about it in July 2021 or August 2021, which was like a few months before I applied for Shark Tank. So when the application came around, we had a good idea about like what we want to do. And we being me and my parents, because my mom actually came up with the name herself. So we were all thinking about it. And then my dad saw an ad for Shark Tank India application in the newspaper. And we checked online and we applied for it. And I passed through 2 online rounds and then there was 1 in-person round in Delhi. So I was able to like pitch over there also to the kind of judges over there. And then I qualified for the final shoot in Bombay. So we reached Bombay in like October 2021 was our filming. And then December 2021, my episode came out.
So what does Kavach mean?
Kavach means shield in Hindi. So since when we first created the app, it was all about bullying and like reporting bullying for victims. My mom thought, why don't we name it Kavach? And then she told me it means shield in Hindi. And initially I was kind of hesitant to keep an Indian name or a Hindi name because I do a lot of global work. So pronouncing the name might be a little hard. But then I thought it's actually pretty easy to say, and it's very connected to the idea of like protecting the victim, of empowering them with the shield that they need to fight the bullies. And so I thought, okay, let's just keep the name as Kavach. And yeah, that's how we decided to spell it as Kavach. So it maybe like somebody who is not Indian will read it like Kavach or something. And then everybody who is not Indian basically pronounces it like Kavach.
Right.
It's funny.
So how did you prepare for it? I mean, you were not even 14 that time, right? So the whole idea, did it not overwhelm you? Take us through that whole idea of conceptualization to actually going and pitching it. Did you go alone or did your parents come with you?
Both my parents came with me to Bombay and my dad actually went with me in the tank as well.
So it was like a team Kavach which went and did it.
Yeah, for sure.
What is their role in it?
Yeah, so my mom, I like to call her the CEO because she is kind of a great manager. She is looking out for opportunities. And for recently, I had my board exam, so she kind of took the reins. So she's a great operational person. And then my dad is more of like the business end because he's been an entrepreneur for a very long time and more of like the vision guy. And he'll kind of guide me and my mom through it. But it's definitely teamwork for sure. I think we're like a small family business.
What designation do you give to yourself if you've given the CEO and the COO to mom and dad?
My dad thinks I'm the heart and soul because, of course, the reason why Kavach exists and the ideas that I come up with, all of it is basically, it comes from me.
So, how did you prepare for the pitch?
So we landed in Bombay for about 3-4 days and we were shooting on the set on the last day. So we had like 2-3 days of rehearsal and then 1 day of shoot, and then we could just kind of go back to our hotel. So it was very, very exhausting. So I'd been on a film set before, but I don't think I'd ever been on like one with such magnitude and people running around and like so much panic and there's so many people. And the first day of rehearsal, I remember, was the most exhausting because we reached at like 7 or 8 a.m. and we left at 11 p.m., 12 a.m.
Wow.
And it was really, really exhausting. I'm not great with memorizing things, but obviously they won't let you just wing it in the tank. You have to memorize a pre-approved pitch. So working on that pitch, memorizing it, all of that, sitting with each and every member of the team was something that I'd never really done before. My only checkers were my mom and dad. And that too, sometimes they just kind of tell me, you don't need a second opinion, just trust yourself. So in this case, having to like ask everybody what they think was definitely a new experience for me. Deciding my ask, what I want from the sharks, who I want as a shark. I don't think I've ever felt as much anxiety and nervousness as I did when I was pitching for Shark Tank, because I was a huge Shark Tank fan, like for Shark Tank USA, since I was a kid. And it's part of what inspired me to take such an entrepreneurial approach to my anti-bullying work. And so this was like a dream come true. There was this like a crippling fear of like messing up, of not performing well. And the night before my final pitch, I lost my mind. Like I had a very bad panic attack and I wasn't able to sleep that night. And I woke up in the morning just a complete wreck. It was really, really, really terrible. But the second that the doors opened and I entered into the tank, suddenly just like those feelings of nervousness just like went away. And there was this sense of calm that washed over me. And I felt like I can do this. I looked at all the sharks' faces and I felt like if I've come so far and I'm standing in front of them, I must be doing something great. So I'm just going to talk to them and see what happens. And then luckily, initially when I was actually pitching, it wasn't going that great. So initially, I thought I'd be getting no sharks and I'm getting 2 sharks. It was just a roller coaster of emotions. And I was so happy. We went back and like my mom was crying and we were all just like so freaked out. Nothing was making sense. It was a life-changing experience.
Amazing. So before you came into Bombay and before the first round started, what kind of homework did you have to do for that?
So because Kavach as an idea was relatively new, so definitely taking all the questions, like discussing what are they going to ask, what are their doubts going to be, all of that was something that we had to kind of sit and consider and think about before we went into the tank. Then, of course, addressing the obvious questions like you're so young, what are you going to do for your schooling? All of that stuff, having to sit and discuss it and get the answers approved and take more ideas. That preparation was definitely very, very important.
So they're more concerned on how powerful and compelling the story is. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say for me, because it was like an impact first startup, they were concerned about, how am I going to reach out to schools? Will they even be accepting of like a reporting mechanism and stuff like that?
So my question to you is, do you even enjoy school now?
Yeah, a lot of people have asked me that, and they all assume that, because I have such exposure, I must be like super bored in school. But that's just not the case. And it's a combination of a lot of things. Like my dad always tells me that if you wanted to finish the syllabus and learn everything that school was teaching you, you could stay home and do it in a month. Anyone could. But I'm sending you to school to have those skills, have friends, to have life, to build relationships with teachers. And I do think that the problems that I faced in school have really helped me grow as a person. So, like, just as an example, in ninth grade, in IB, you have to pick up two sciences. So I picked up biology and chemistry as my two sciences. And I was horrible at chemistry. I hated every second of it. In IB, you get marked out of 7. So I got a 4 on 7 in my grade 9 term 1. And I had to work my way through. So despite hating the subject, making myself do it and then suddenly falling in love with it and talking to my teacher and asking for help and helping other people and, really, really putting in that effort of getting through a subject you don't even like has been a really important journey for me. And from going from that 5 to a 7 on 7 in my term 2 of ninth grade was important for me to have that experience. I'm not going to say that chemistry will help me ever in my life because it's not going to. But that experience and the confidence that it's given me is always going to stay with me.
How do you balance your entrepreneurial pursuit, your academic commitments, and personal life? What does a day look like? How have you thought of it?
So it all boils down to time management, really. I like to stay on top of things. It's the only way I get anything done. And for me, a lot of my life is kind of takes place in blocks. So there'll be months where I'm doing only and only work, not even a little bit of studying. And then there'll be months like, for example, April and May, which were because I had exams, only and only studies. I'm not even looking at work. So for some, it might be a little bit disbalanced, but that's just how it works for me. In the months that are not as busy for me in terms of like exams, I tend to do a lot of sessions or maybe I'm like getting a lot of stuff done. Like, for example, for our 10th grade from August to October, I was working on the second version of Kavach and all of the content, but I was still attending school. But because we didn't have any exams or anything going on, I was able to give more time to work. And then, of course, to-do lists, trying not to procrastinate, taking care of your mental health, all of that is really, really, really important. And then, of course, having a really strong support system. As I said, it's a family business. Like right now, my exams are over, but I've not done any work. Like this is, and apart from this and a few other calls, I'm not really actively working because I need a break. My mind needs rest. And they are there to take the reins. So yeah, it's a combination of good time management, understanding your priorities in that moment in your life, and then, of course, a strong support system.
So what was your mom doing before she became actively involved in Kavach?
She's a chartered accountant, actually, and she used to run her own firm till, I think, a few years ago, 2020 or 2021, where she quit her practice to join me full time.
So tell us about the dynamic with your parents, not as parents, but as your business partners, if I can use that word. Are there any arguments, any discussions? How do you guys resolve those arguments, if at all?
I think for us, work is the most important thing, apart from obviously our health and our family, because it's something that we're all really, really passionate about. For my dad, because he's built so many businesses and he himself has faced quite a bit of mental health issues when he was in his 20s and 30s. So for him, there's kind of like a personal connection. And for my mom, she is very enterprising. She's very like hands-on, like she is willing to get down and do the work. She's very hardworking. So for her, it's very fun. Like she loves to help me. She loves to keep looking for opportunities. And of course, she's interested in me. So she wants to make sure that I am thriving. But in our house, there's a lot of like, I don't think there's calm discussions. Like we're always like very aggressive, but in a good way. I mean, there's no like disrespect, but I would say it's a lot of passion. So whenever we talk, we're like, yes, this, and no. And there's just like a lot of like passion.
Is there a division of work? Like clearly this is my territory and this is not mine?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Because if you keep doing everything, everybody does everything, it gets in the way. So we've had to sit and divide that. And sometimes human nature, you even make comments and you're like, you're doing this wrong. But then having to remind yourself that's not your job, that's their job. All of that is like important too.
Any impactful advice you received as an entrepreneur which has influenced your approach? While I appreciate theoretically entrepreneur, but do you see yourself as an entrepreneur? How do you define yourself? Like, how can you relate to that word?
No, I completely understand. And I get this a lot actually, because people always see entrepreneurs as like these like corporate, like money making kind of individuals. And I'm not that. I'm the complete opposite. So for the longest time, I didn't actually see myself as an entrepreneur. But now that I'm exploring more, and I think I see that you can always redefine the definition. An entrepreneur doesn't always have to be somebody who is passionate about making money. An entrepreneur is somebody who does good work and uplifts other people in doing so. So it can also be making an impact and involving as many young people as possible. That's what it looks like for me. That's why when I define Kavach, I say it's an impact first initiative. Yes, it is definitely, everything needs money to run. We live in a world that's structured that way. But what we focus on to power us and power our engines is the impact and the work that we do.
It's already being used actively, the app?
Yes, it is being used right now. We've just launched it. So we're doing a little bit of testing and all of that. And we're also working on getting more versions out. As soon as we launch the second version, we're like, there's more work to be done. So we started doing it.
Of course.
Yeah. And right now, I haven't checked recently, but I think there would be above 200 or 300 downloads for Kavach. It's
Right.
both on App Store, Google Play Store, anything.
How did you start funding it?
So for the first version, it was Shark Tank and of course, family and friends, all of that. And now for the second version, it's fully like investors, family and friends, all of that for the second version.
So what's next for Anoushka? Is college on the cards?
There is quite a bit of like, we're having a lot of fights about college because like on one hand, I definitely do want to go to college. Like that's for sure. I want to get an education, but I'm debating on where to go, US, UK, India, all of that. Like how long do I want my course to be, what I want to study even. That's something that I'm kind of debating. But my idea is that wherever I go, I want to soak up as much knowledge as I can and just learn what I can. That's my goal. It's not to become the best student or get the best placement. I just want to learn.
So can you imagine going to a job, or you just want dying to do more entrepreneurial work?
I will definitely continue what I'm doing. So we're trying to figure out like how I can balance that with college, because of course college, some people say it's less burden, some people say it's more. So I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to balance that. But no, definitely I will continue what I'm doing right now. I found my passion.
Awesome. So before we end the conversation, any leadership lessons which you want to share, which you imbibe in this journey as an entrepreneur thus far?
I saw a very interesting quote last month. It was leaders lead from the back. So I thought that was very interesting because when we talk about leadership, we always see like kind of like the leader of the pack who's standing in the front, who's defending everybody. But leadership is, as I said, in my story, it's always been about empowering people who feel powerless. So leaders are not people who want to be in front or want to be the hero. Leaders are people who actively want to make other people feel like they can be heroes.
Thank you, Anoushka. This was lovely. And thank you for being my youngest guest on Atlanta Diaries.
Thank you.
Thank you for being a part of this incredible journey with Atlanta Diaries. I have had the privilege of hosting guests who courageously shared their most vulnerable selves with me. And even if only a small segment of these conversations can champion the journey of one person, it will be worth each and every moment. And together, we know we can create an even greater impact So I do have a humble request for you. If you found value in these episodes, please consider sharing the podcast with your friends, family, and on your social media. I would also love to hear your thoughts and will really appreciate if you could take a moment to leave a review or rating. See you next week for another inspiring journey on Atlanta Diaries.